It's not very good to say anyway, sometimes.
You haven't lost your voice.
You can have that mic. Funny, it's a bit like the film, isn't it? Yeah, it's whispering. Yeah.
Sorry?
Christian Townsend.
What did you just say?
Education.
Oh, right. Sorry. I lost my voice, so I'm having to whisper. Can you hear all right? Yeah, but I'm going to speak quite softly, which is unusual for me.
Make a joke.
Can you hear at the back? Good, okay. I might get away with it.
Yeah, we'll be starting at 15:15. Just give a bit more time for anyone that is wanting to come to turn up. About 5 minutes.
It's germ warfare. Somebody's just planted this germ on me just before the hustings start.
No, they're my friends.
Hi. Thank you. That's what I am. Where's me? Come on.
Did you see that?
From
Duncan Smith saying 75 or 77 or something.
So
People that boots sanctioned.
that's not a very common name.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I'd say.
what's he? I'm a JSA. Yeah. He's only one
Your man's a good short name.
He posted it and I watched it.
No good.
But the way that Aidan Smith sort of he's ever so chummy, looking to people. Look at something. Yeah, cool. Journalists should know better than that.
Yeah, they have to be like a bit more savvy and a bit more critical, almost just searching for the truth rather than being charmed.
Michael Crick. Bloke yesterday asking questions.
It's crazy. Yeah, I'll have to look for that video online.
Yeah.
Hashtag red trousers. Hashtag hustings red trousers. Have you seen in the UWE, there's a picture of one guy and it says all you need is tweed and red trousers.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a pair of red trousers and a tweed jacket and like lying down really provocatively on a pair of steps.
We might think it's provocative.
Yeah, it is nauseating. What's he doing? Why is he asking these people?
Introduce themselves. And then, yeah, well, there's going to be introduce themselves. We're going to go through the questions, which will be very, very controlled stuff. And then once we've got through that, we'll open up. So that might then need you to do more. I will probably just start here and work the way down. No, of course, Right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. We're going to head and start because I'm aware that the Liberal Democrat candidate has to leave a little bit early. She has a train to catch to I believe, a conference of the party. So there may well be more people that arrive a bit later on or trickle in. I know there's a few meetings going on with people who want to be here but have to be at briefings, and then they'll be here afterwards. So hopefully that won't be too distracting. So First off, let me say thank you all for coming and welcome to this question time event. I am Sean Lomax. I'm the president of the Politics and International Relations Society and the chair of meetings elected at the Student Union. I will be chairing this afternoon, rather. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly run down the format for the event, and then I'm going to hand over to the candidates. So what we're going to do is, first off, we're going to hear from each of them, who they are, why they're running for mayor, maybe a flagship policy, all kept brief, please. Once we've heard from them, we have 3 pre-selected questions that pairs have put together, which we are going to then ask and hear each of their responses. It's going to be a little bit of a slow start, but the idea is just get everyone in the mood. Once we've gone through each of the pre-selected questions, we're then going to open up to yourselves for any of the questions that you have. We have people with mics, so once you've been, Hippo's going to be the one actually picking out the people to answer the questions because he can actually see, I can't. Once you've been, he'll call out who he's picked. Ollie over at the back there is then going to run a mic to you. So if you're going to hold off on whatever you've got to say until you get the mic. Obviously, standard rules apply. Please, everyone, refrain from personal attacks or anything like that. If you, this is more about learning why these people are running for mayor and what they can do for you in that role. So if we can try and keep on that kind of focus, that would be wonderful. There's going to be a standard speaker time for responses that's going to be a minute. This is to make sure that we can hear as many people as possible and get through as much as possible. Obviously, I'll be a little bit lenient here and there. There will also be, if one person mentions another person directly or their policies or the policies of their party, I will allow a right of reply. So there will be a little bit, may well be a little bit of back and forth, but we don't want it to get too out of control. So where necessary, I will be stepping in. At the 30-second mark of each speaker time, I'll give a little knock, just so that you're aware that your time is elapsing. Right, so let's begin by going through and hearing from each of the candidates. George Ferguson, would you like to start?
So how long have we got?
Just a minute to introduce yourself.
Okay.
And why you're running for mayor.
Thank you very much. I'm here and I'm mayor because I stood just over 3 years ago because I felt that Bristol needed a new form of governance. Bristol had lagged behind many other cities in the UK, including some of the northern cities, in terms of its determination to change, because we had a very dithering form of governance that chopped and changed between parties and got marred down in politics. And I felt that as an independent that I could drive that change. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an architect, I'm a brewer, I'm somebody who's spent my whole life, 50 years in Bristol since coming to Bristol University, the other university, the second university, of course, in the city, I was determined to make it the city that I believe that it's got the possibility of becoming. And we're driving change, but there's so much more to do. We've got to produce enough housing for this city. We've got to create a city that is a much fairer one. We've got to create social mobility. We've got to create a transport system. All those things need doing because of the lack of action over decades. And I'm somebody with the drive and determination. I am independent. I put together a cabinet of the most diverse cabinet in the country politically, that it has 5 different political persuasions from independent through the 4 main parties, and I value their advice, and they leave their politics out of the door when we're making decisions for Bristol. And my only criteria in making a decision is whether it makes Bristol a better place or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can pass that, yeah, you've got the mic. Excellent.
Hello, is that working? No?
You have to turn on.
It's working. Hi, I'm Paul Saville. I'm running for mayor this year. I'm 30 this year, just turned. I studied here once upon a time. I studied sociology and criminology here. We took part in 2 occupations here, one over Palestine, which was 4 days running, and then one over the tuition fees, which happened in 2010, 2011, where we occupied the Core 24, renamed it Hardcore 24, which was interesting. We were the second longest running occupation in the country for 24 days, and we had massive support from the student body here, but also connected to all the other universities that were also in occupation at the time. So I take great pride in speaking about anti-cuts, and also, well, I'm about free education actually, in terms of the student stuff. My personal life is about selling tea. I sell tea down at the Bear Pit Roundabout. That's my kind of day-to-day bread and butter. It's how I earn my money. So I'm self-employed. I work hard, cycle around Bristol, and I get to meet lots of people, and I love Bristol a lot. In terms of politics, I would suggest I'm kind of, is that my time up, is it?
30 seconds.
Okay, alright. In terms of my politics, I'd say I was a lefty, if you like, but I would say I would describe myself more as a human being, really, who wants to see more fairer Bristol for people, not just a select group of people. And housing is a big thing, which I'm sure a lot of the candidates will also be speaking about. But it's funny that everyone talks about it when an election's coming up. We've been campaigning for equal access to housing for the last 4 years in Bristol, and now we've come to such a crisis point. It's interesting that candidates are now more interested in what we're talking about. In terms of flagship policy, I'm suggesting that we get these empty buildings open today or tomorrow. Tomorrow morning would be good. There's over 1,000 empty buildings in Bristol right at this moment in time, and we've got thousands of people homeless. Let's get this problem sorted, give people a chance, and build a more equal Bristol for everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Townsend. I'm a teacher by profession. I've been doing that for nearly 20 years. I'm also the co-founder of an organisation called Integrate Bristol, which is a young person's organisation that's put female genital mutilation at the national level. I sit on Bristol's Children's Safeguarding Board, and I'm also the vice chair of the Bristol Schools Forum. And I'm standing for one reason, and it goes back to fairness, social mobility and equality, which we're going to hear a lot about during this election. Our education system, our state education system in this city, has been socially selective for decades. I went to school in Bristol, and those of us in the room that also went to school in Bristol will still recognise the social selection that is in our state system. This has been accelerated under the Academies programme, and particularly under the current administration. Any vision from any mayor, from any party in this city that doesn't recognise and start with the social selection that is happening in our state sector doesn't have a vision that is interested in making sure that the public sector that is used by 1 in 5 of our Bristolian population, that will be able to reduce that inequality and bring about social mobility. If they don't start with education, then what's happening is that maintenance of privilege will only continue. Thank you.
Woo! Yeah, we do apologise that we are a little bit pushy, but we're just aware that there is so many of you, and we really want to hear from as many of you as possible on all the things we have to talk about this evening. Let's carry on, please.
Hello everybody, my name's Tony Dyer. I'm the Green Party candidate. I grew up in a deprived part of the city, and I had to leave the city to be able to get the type of career that I felt I was able to fulfil. So I moved away from the city for a while, and then came back and got involved in quite a lot of local community activity in places like Aldermarket, Ashton Gate and a few other areas. Like some of the other candidates have already said, I think most of us know where the problems are in this city: housing, transport, education and skills, and also the need to make sure that we provide energy for the future that doesn't destroy the planet. I think we all know what the problems are. What we also probably need to argue more about is what the solutions need to be. We do have a very divided city. 1 in 4 of our kids live in poverty. 1 in 5 of our neighbourhoods are amongst the most 10% most deprived in the country. That's not acceptable for a city as wealthy as Bristol is. What I would plan to do is introduce and talk to you about different policies and different solutions, put them up for discussion about how we can fix some of those problems and how we can make sure that this city is a city that all of us can be proud of and all of us feel as if we can take part in it and fulfil our potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Turner. I'm the UKIP candidate. I too went to school in Bristol, in Hartcliffe. I didn't go to university. It was one of those things that was not really an option in those days. My parents couldn't afford it. I went into full-time work. I've been working with odd periods of unemployment ever since. My profession is that of a telecommunications engineer. I'm also a part-time carer for elderly people as well. I live in the central part of the city, in Hotwells, and one of the reasons I want to run as mayor and want to become mayor is that I see a very divided city, and it is divided in many, many ways. Geographically, there are parts of the city that feel completely excluded from being Bristol or being part of Bristol. So much happens in the centre, so little happens on the outskirts. There is also social divide, as Tony quite rightly said, that it's very, very difficult for people from different backgrounds to actually get on in a city such as Bristol, sadly. But there are other divides as well. Believe it or not, there's divisions between cyclists and motorists now, and if you go out in the streets of Bristol, yes, they might well actually want to be killing each other as opposed to helping each other make our roads safer. So many divides in such a big, such a good city. Sorry?
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, my name's Marvin Rees, and like some of the other candidates, I'll say I'm from Bristol. I grew up in here. I suppose I share a bit of my story. I grew up with just my mum and my sister, but I'm one of about 8 children that we know of. My dad was quite active around town. But the way I describe my life growing up here is that I've seen the best and the worst of what Bristol has to offer. I'm sitting here because of some of the experiences I had growing up in Bristol. But actually I saw incredible adversity growing up as well. I went to St. George School, which is in the middle of the town, and I saw many of my friends just drop out the other end. Some are dead, some are in prison, some went on to make something of themselves. I'm here because I want Bristol to be a city where that aspiration and that opportunity is shared across all young people. At the moment, I don't know if this, I think it's the biggest travesty in a report called Elitist Britain that tells us that we are one of the most socially immobile countries in the Western Hemisphere, and I don't think Bristol's bucking that trend. That's an absolute injustice, and it robs us of millions of pounds worth of talent every year. In terms of policies, we're going to be talking about the same priorities, right? People need homes to live in. We need an education system that offers an equal platform to all, a platform of opportunity, doesn't rule people out of opportunity simply because they're poor. And what I do want to do also is look at how we tackle the city's health inequalities. It's a huge injustice that some people are born destined to become unwell and die before others. So we've got to invest early doors in mental health resilience of our children and young people.
Thank you very much. Again, I feel really bad for having to cut them off, but
Don't.
There'll be plenty of time to talk about policies.
Hello, I'm Kate Barnard and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for mayor. Why am I standing? Well, it's quite simple really. Bristol is a fantastic city, but it's one of the most frustrating places to live on a day-to-day basis. The transport is dire, bus is slow and expensive, housing is ridiculously expensive, businesses can't thrive when their vans get stuck in the traffic. And on top of that, as we've been hearing, the prosperity just isn't spread across the city. It's shocking that people in the poorest areas of Bristol, the men in particular, have a 9-year shorter life in the poorer areas than they do in places like Stoke Bishop. So finding solutions is absolutely not going to be easy. I mean, it requires concerted work by everyone in Bristol. And that's one thing that's absolutely sure. A top-down style of government just doesn't work. You have to work with the communities, you have to work with all their representatives, including the councillors, to get things done. And that's my background. I get things done. I came from a single-parent family too, and I was one of the lucky ones who went to university funded by the government. I'm from Bristol too, and that's really my passion, is to make sure that we have a fairer city and a better place to live, for goodness sakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I should also just like to point out to candidates, I don't know if you noticed, we are recording this, so this will be put out on the Student Union website, and if any of you would like it, talk to our lovely cameraman at the end and he'll see to it that you get a copy for your own social media purposes. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the 3 pre-selected questions, which you should have all seen already. I did email you about them. So what Pairs did, we took a little time one afternoon, we were in the canteen and we asked a couple of staff and students about what were the 3 issues most important to them in Bristol, and if they could ask the mayor themselves, what would they be? And from all of the responses, we put together 3 pre-selected questions, which I'm going to ask you guys now. We're going to do the same sort of format again. We're going to hear from each of you on your response to the question. Same thing again with the time and with the knock halfway through to let you know your time is running out. So we'll move very swiftly on. The first question is about housing. Housing is obviously a very important issue in Bristol and is a very important issue to students, ensuring that housing is both affordable and of a good quality in that you can actually live in the house. And there have been a lot of effort put in by the different universities at Bristol to try and put together registers of responsible landlords and put together recommendations of good properties and give advice to students. But even despite all of these efforts, housing still remains a very deeply controversial subject in the city and among the student population. So the question for you is, as mayor, what will you do to work to ensure that students have the housing that they need at the prices they can afford? Starting with you, Mr. Ferguson.
We live, sorry about my voice, it's sod. Anyway, we live in a very expensive city. We live in an expensive city because it's a good and popular city, it's a growing city, and over generations we've not built enough housing. In fact, we used to own 30,000 of our own homes in the city. That's been eroded down to 27,500 now because of the right to buy. The right to buy has eaten into our social housing. We haven't built new council homes for decades, and we are starting to build new council homes now. So in only 3 years, I've had to pick up from a standing start in terms of homes. We have crazy national regulations that inhibit us. And I listen to the others, and actually they're talking about the need for national change in policy, and I agree with all of that. But I have to work within those limitations. I am negotiating with government to see if we can change the planning rules so that when a developer is developing new housing, they are they are committed to providing affordable housing on the back of it, without getting out of it by claiming that they can't afford it because of the land price. In effect, the land price should be taken out of the equation so that we get more affordable housing, 30% at least affordable housing on every single development in Bristol. I can't do that at the moment because of national regulations. There are so many other ways that we need to incentivise the building of new homes. We have 8,000 new homes with planning permission that are unbuilt. 2,000 of those are in the process of getting built. 6,000 are stuck. We should be charging council tax on unbuilt homes, and that would get them built. So I think we need a carrot and stick method to get many more homes built. But I am not allowed in a market economy to control the rents in a way that ideally we should, because you are paying far too much for your accommodation. I absolutely acknowledge that.
Thank you very much.
Going down, are we? Yeah.
Yes, just as before.
Hello? Yeah. Okay, so my kind of background is when I was 16 and 17, I was homeless twice. No one really understands what it's like to be homeless until you are, when you actually lose everything, and you never think it's going to happen to you. I never thought it was going to happen to me when I was 12 years old. 4 years later, lost everything, lost my flat, went into kind of a mental breakdown, and eventually lived in a tent. Living in a tent, next to a little stream was very, very lonely, and that's a situation that many Bristolians are facing now. It's a situation which is not going to go away, no matter what the Bristol City Council spokespersons tell us. They're just going to go away. Nick Hooper, if that's a name to anyone, he's a service director at Bristol City Council. Now he earns £91,000 a year to tell the poorest people in Bristol to go and sleep under bridges rather than sleep in shop doorways. This problem isn't going to go away, and no matter... well, it's true, George. It's not going to go away. And my real experience of being homeless is, like I say, there's a thousand empty buildings in Bristol right now which could be occupied. I've made a video recently, and it's called The Tale of the Two Cities, which is a kind of a playoff of Charles Dickens's book. Now, Bristol is a tale of two cities. There's people sleeping in tents, whilst people are living it up. It's real, I can't believe it. We're living in 2016, and this is the situation we're living in. My friend over there, Leo, and I, we found a mansion, essentially, in Clifton Down, which is 30 bedrooms. It's completely empty, and it's been empty for 2.5 years. That could house 200 people. We need radical solutions to fix this housing crisis, not just build... Actually, no, I'm not even interested in affordable homes, because what do we mean by affordable? We need to look at social housing, places where people could be part of, not just chuck them in a hostel and say, go and get your methadone script on a Monday morning.
If you could start wrapping up?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, places where people can actually grow and be part of the community that they're now involved in. So, although building new homes is one aspect of it, it's actually getting the homes which already exist on the market back into use for Bristolians, including students as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So the question was about students and quality of housing and affordability. I don't, council houses, we need them, yeah, because we've got a housing crisis, but there aren't going to be many students that are going to be very high up on the council housing list, or actually the social housing list. So what really what we're talking about here is private rented landlords, I would imagine, for the majority of students that actually go to UWE. And what we need to be looking at, I agree with Paul, we've got nearly 900 houses that are privately owned in the city that are currently stood empty. So it's about making sure that the housing officers are finding out who owns these houses and why aren't they being brought back into use. And if they're not going to be brought back into use, then we need to be looking at compulsory purchase orders, because we need our housing stock so that people can live in them, and that will do something to bring down the affordability levels. Working with universities, there's loads of student housing that's going up in the centre of the city. I'm very interested to know why that is £140, £150 a week. I think that's too much for students, but where are those students then going to go once that first year or that second year is out of, when they've finished? Where do the universities think that the thousands of students, the places for students that they've brought into the city in the last few years, because tuition fees now bring money in, where I want to know where that strategy is, working with the universities and the housing officers. Where is that strategy moving forward about where those students are actually going to be living in the communities? So there are a number of things that can be done, but it's a very tough circle that we've got to kind of round up, and there is a massive housing crisis that is the backdrop. But in terms of students, private landlords is where it's going to be really, other than the student accommodation that is currently being built around the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just like Christine said, I'm treating this question about students and how we sort out some of the problems that students are facing. The National Union of Students recently estimated that there was a shortfall in student living costs of about £8,000 between what they have to pay and what they're able to get in income from student loans and from maintenance grants. And the maintenance grants, of course, have now been replaced by maintenance loans, which is yet another burden of debt that's being put onto students. Let's be blunt about it. Rents are the new way in which students are being impoverished. What we find in a lot of areas is that accommodation is mainly provided by private companies and landlords, about 80% of it across the country. And there is a considerable difference in the amount of rents that are being paid. So if you're in the southwest, the average rent for student accommodation provided by the university is about £140 per week. For students that are living in private rental accommodation, it's £160 per week. and that's at the lowest end of the scale. So what do we do about it? Well, I've already started conversations with both Bristol University and University of West of England, because again, Christine is absolutely right, we need to start to see some investment back into the city about how we provide student accommodation at a more reasonable price. One of the things that has started to happen in London with the Green Party in London is a lot of Green Party students are lobbying now for something called a student living wage, and that student living wage is based on rents at 35% of average student income, so that would work out about £110 per week. I'll be really happy to work with any of you guys who want to start lobbying and start doing some direct action to get that done in Bristol as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, student housing, student accommodation, it's always been a big issue. I would say one of the things we need to ask, one of the questions we need to ask certainly of the universities is it fair to be inviting ever-growing numbers of students into the universities when there's fewer and fewer accommodation for second-year students to actually move on to? What I would like to do as Mayor is introduce a Mayor's Charter for letting agents, where a stipulation of a minimum quality standard can be stated, and students and universities can advertise that as the place to go to actually rent property from, so that we can at least address a quality issue, because there are far too many properties across the city that are, quite frankly, a health hazard, as not just unfit for living in. What I think we also need to do, as Tony touched on, is we also need to work with the universities in the city and look at the possibility of actually creating smaller student accommodation opportunities across the city, co-funded by the council and the universities for second year onward students as opposed to first year students who are mainly on large campuses. These could be properties that could hold maybe up to 12 or 20 students, so they're much smaller, much easier to install and build and actually have up and running reasonably quickly. So I think we need to get a lot of people together around the table, especially universities, and actually see what we can do about looking at the numbers of students we have and actually having a unified city university approach to actually supplying suitable accommodation at an affordable price for students from year 2 onwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I think we all recognise just how important our universities are to the success of the city. One of the biggest boasts for Bristol in presenting this image to the outside world of creativity and prosperity is that we have 2 world-class universities. UWE has a very high employment rate at the end of the track, and we got this global reputation. And we know that we need those to continue to be successful. We also know that one of the biggest draws to Bristol universities, also I'm told by the university leadership they believe, is the quality of life. It's Bristol, the dynamism, the vibe, and all that type of stuff, the diversity. So obviously we know that the housing crisis facing the wider city and students in particular as well, it could be one of those things that's a real liability to that future success. Specifically in terms of students in private rentals, what we're talking about is extended a landlord registration scheme across the city, taking really proactive action against landlords who are letting substandard properties to all Bristolians, including students. And I think lining up with that, what we've got to do is work closely with our universities as well. I heard recently that a very senior member of this very university, his daughter was in Bristol University, and he found out that the landlord had accommodation in appalling condition. So he happened to mention he was a very senior member of this university. Unless he sorted it out, he would fix it that landlord would not be able to rent to another Bristol student. It got sorted out. It shouldn't depend on connections. Unfortunately, in Bristol we have an establishment. It tells us it's not an establishment, but it is an establishment, and it can work like that. But I think there's another conversation. It's something I do ask students, not just to think about student life, but to think about the city. We have a challenge, we have a housing crisis, and student accommodation has an impact on wider Bristol. So we need to work with the university to say, what is the impact of an ever-expanding student body on the wider life in Bristol in terms of our ability to build stable, balanced communities that we can all feel safe in and give us a platform for a good life?
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. This is not just a student problem, is it? It's a city-wide problem. There's an enormous shortage of housing in the city, and the rents and purchase prices are reaching ridiculous levels. In Bristol, there is something called the Acorns Letting Charter, which agents and landlords sign up to on a voluntary basis to agree that they will give reasonable terms to the tenants. It's been reasonably successful, but it's voluntary. And I think you need to ask the UWE management why their students' letting office doesn't use that Acorn Lettings Charter to make sure that the accommodation for students is up to standard. The universities have a real responsibility. There are 50,000 students now in the Greater Bristol area, which has a population of 600,000. That's getting on for 10% of the population. So the universities themselves, they're not short of cash. They get $250 million just in fees. So you should be asking them why they are not taking their pastoral duties more carefully. So you've got some questions to ask them. If there is poor quality accommodation, the city has the right to licence the landlords in an area where there is social problems. So you can, if you're in an area where you think there are real problems and the housing is really poor, you can ask the city council to licence that area, and then the landlords have to register and pay a fee. And it's worked in fish ponds, I have to say. So yes, it's not just the city council, it's you as well, and it's a real city-wide problem for everyone in Bristol. So thank you.
First off, we're going to keep with the 2 minutes. I don't know if you noticed, but we doubled the time, and we think it seems to be suiting everyone a lot better. So we're going to stick with the 2 minute speaker time. Would you like to be the first to talk on the second issue? I'm just aware that you haven't really had a chance to say a lot, and I know you have to run.
I don't know, I think I actually have to go.
All right.
The traffic's like.
Okay, no, it's absolutely fine.
It's on transport as well, isn't it?
The next issue was transport, yes.
Oh, I'm quite happy to quit.
Very quick word.
Very quickly, just
very
2 minutes.
quick word.
So the question is on transport. Obviously, transport in Bristol is a hugely controversial topic, just generally speaking, and is an essential part of everyday student life. Being able to get from where you live to where you study is very, very important, especially for students of UWE who live in the centre. And Bristol is notorious nationwide for problems with its buses, taxi fares, and no parking. So the question is, to you, as mayor, what will you do to improve transport in the city, specifically for students?
Okay, well, thank you very much. You have my sympathies. I'm a bus user, and there's nothing worse than standing at a bus stop on a cold, wet night waiting for a bus that doesn't come. And that's true across the whole city. And the real problem is getting home at night as well, isn't it? Because the buses more or less stop at about 10:15. So you can be there at a cold, wet bus stop for well over half an hour waiting for some way of getting home. The train network is run down, and not everyone can cycle. There's a fair number of people like me who are absolutely scared of the other road users. So what can a mayor do? Well, the government can devolve powers over transport, but it has to be working with the other local councils in the area. And that's what I would want to do. We would have the power to make sure that the buses run where we want them, at the time we want them, and at the fares we want them. And that's really what it's all about, having control over the transport network. So yes, that's what I would do. So thank you. And I'm sorry I'm a bit brief, but I have to catch a train.
Thank you very much for coming.
That's all right.
I hope you get everywhere you need to be on time. If you just give it to Marvin and then he can carry on. Is that alright with you?
Oh God.
I think. Thank you, Sean.
Is that all? There you go. I was really taken just a few weeks ago when, well, a few months ago now, when I got caught in the gridlock in the middle of town. If any of you were aware of this, it was like the end of the world. It really felt like the apocalypse. So one of the things that struck me is, however we talk about transport in the city, just how fragile our connectivity and our transport system is in Bristol. And we can talk about the history, but we can also talk about the promises that have been made to sort it out, but we still have an incredibly fragile transport system, which is frightening. That was on the basis of a traffic light running out of phase. We've also had warnings from a number of places about food shocks, environmental change. I mean, if we had if we had another kind of social shock, I think we'd be in a horrific situation in the city. Working with what is, what I'd like to do is certainly look at ticketing that goes across different modes of transport, a single flat fare for Bristol. We can negotiate that with our current providers, and making sure that some of our tickets, in terms of giving flexibility and dynamism to our ability to use our public transport network, last for a period of time, not just one ticket per bus, but you buy a ticket and it's in place for a period of time, so that we can have much more dynamism around that. But I think too there's a way of working. I met someone, a very senior member of our bus network recently, and the question I asked them was, what do you need from the rest of the city to be able to flourish in what you do as a public transport provider? And the ironic thing is that question has not been asked. Public transport is not just a product of buses running on time, that's really important, but it's also about safety on the streets. It's also about the nature of relationship between staff and the public using those services as well. And I think we have a public transport network that's felt under siege. I think too, when we talk about taxis, which is something else that was mentioned, our taxi drivers are pretty disillusioned at the moment. I'm being told that one of the biggest impediments to them offering a quality service, maybe even reducing prices, around the fact they have one MOT centre where they can register their cars, which means that if they fail their MOT, they're off the road for a number of weeks. It's a massive impact on them. Sorry?
Just time to wrap up.
Okay, yeah. So, we've talked about parking as well. You know, the thing in RPZs, there are pros and cons to RPZs, but cutting through bureaucracy is not the same as cutting through communities. And when you don't listen and you don't include people in the decisions you make about the city, you just do it because you want to do it, you leave people feeling the democracy undermined, and you leave them feeling disillusioned. There's lots of people in the city feeling like this after the last few years.
Thank you.
Yeah, transport. It is a massive problem right across the city, just about anywhere you go, not just central Bristol. How can we deal with that? Well, parking was mentioned. I will mention something about that first. Next door to the flats that I live in, a small student accommodation was built. There's about 18, 20 students living there. It's great, and there's no problems with the students. The trouble is, there was absolutely no parking provisions made whatsoever for those additional people. Now, and this is what I'm seeing across the city a lot, is we see a lot of office blocks being built, we see a lot of student accommodation being built, but what we're not seeing is any additional parking spaces for the many thousand additional people that are coming into the city. We have to realise that although we want to try and take as many cars off the road as possible, we have to realise is that they are a necessity for an awful lot of people. And again, not everybody can cycle or take a bus or go by train. The bus system in this city is diabolical. I'd say probably 9 out of 10 people who speak to me about the buses speak to me in a negative form about it. Mainly about how buses are delayed or they just don't turn up. The cost of travelling on a bus, it wasn't that long ago that I went to Rome for a rugby match, and for €1 I had unlimited travel around the city on their bus network. Now that to me was value for money. The buses weren't particularly good, they were crowded, but I didn't mind, it was only €1. Why can't we do something like that in this city? Taxi fares, yeah, we do have to bear in mind when we talk about taxis and taxi drivers, is that they only earn when they've got a fare in the back of their car. And they don't always have a fare in the back of their car. What I'd like to see is possibly a cap or some fixed prices for taxis, specific journeys across the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
In 2015, I stood as the Green Party candidate for the parliamentary elections, and one of the policies that the Green Party was proposing was to provide free local travel for all young people. And we costed that up. That would have cost about £4 billion per year, which we were going to pay for by putting some taxes on some of the very rich people and ask them to contribute a bit more towards the country. To do that in Bristol, unfortunately, would cost something like £250 million per year. I don't think any of the mayoral candidates will have that sort of money, but what we can do is we can start to look at, if we look at public transport, for instance, at the moment there is a 30% discount on bus travel for students, but that's not enough because the bus fares are so expensive in this city. And I think we come back to this point that we need to start talking to the universities. It's been mentioned a few times about how much money they've got coming into their systems. If we were to arrange a situation where we got up to 10,000 students from this city travelling on the buses, that is a massive source of income for the bus company. And we should be talking with the bus companies how much further discount they might be willing to give to get the extra income from all you students either jumping on the bus and making use of it. The other thing I was also quickly add, Marvin mentioned about single flat fare. We also need to do away with the zoner system where we got £4 being paid for the inner city, but if you go slightly beyond that, beyond the city, it goes up to £6.50 for a day ride, and the only reason it goes up to £6.50 is because there's only one bus company that operates in that outer area. We need to stop bus companies taking advantage of their monopoly, and we need to start looking at what we can do to bring bus services back under public control, so that when we get the money from the bus fares, we can invest it back into our public transport system.
Thank you.
I think a lot has been said actually already, particularly about the buses and the ticketing and the flat rates. So what I think I want to add to it is that there are a number of unused railway lines across our city, and they've been sat unused since I was a kid. And these need to be brought back into use. There's one at Ashton, Portishead. Been talking about opening Portishead line for years and years and years. It needs to be opened. When Abbey Wood, I remember when that was grass just up the road, but when Abbey Wood was opened, the idea that they would get a train station there from Temple Meads, it was part of the development. So there is something about when development comes in, the transport and systems need to be thought about, and it's like that hasn't happened in Bristol for many, many years. Having said that, actually most students, I think, are probably going to be using the buses. So that, in the immediate sort of future, is where I think the savings and the kind of the discussions need to be had.
Okay, so when I was a student here at UWE, I ran for student, the UESU 3 times, and the big topic was always about transport. It was always the U-links. Can I swear? Shit. The U-links were shit. We actually had it on posters. The U-links are shit, and everyone knew it. And year after year after year, the politicians, i.e. the council, the UESU, would promise that they would be sorted out, and nothing ever got done. It'd always be the same. So I think it's time that we start, in a general sense, try to promote a more transparent and more open and democratic process to actually sorting out the transport. Number one, I think Tony mentioned it then about making the buses public. I've lived in Bristol nearly 10 years and it's not got any better really. First is absolutely atrocious, and someone mentioned it earlier about having a monopoly. Take it back off them, make the buses public. Make them public. I really believe in public ownership over our transport systems for the good of people, not just to make money off people and make first shareholders really, really rich. A little bit on RPZ, I think Marvin mentioned about the democratic process, which has completely been what's the term? Run roughshod over. You speak to lots of Bristolians all over the city. They're angry. They're angry because they weren't included in the debate. Whatever your feelings on RPZ were or are, people should be consulted with, and they haven't been. In terms of the student stuff, as a student, 4 years at UWE, I cycled every day to uni, and to be honest, that was my best way of getting to uni. I beat the cars and the buses actually, and now there's that fantastic cycle path which goes from the back of Frenchay through the new housing stuff, and then down to St Werburgh's. Actually, it's much better. I'd suggest people get on their bike. Basically, it's much healthier as well. Get through nature, see some stuff, see the world. Fantastic.
I'll try this time. I think we need to think about a much bigger picture for this city. I hear about parking and traffic jams. In the 50 years I've been in the city, it's got worse and worse and worse, and nobody has grasped that nettle, and nobody's grasped that nettle because they haven't dared. Because if you start interfering with people's cars, they get really angry. And yet, in a democracy, sometimes you have to take some tough decisions in order to take people over that bridge so they can see a better future. And my future is of a city that is zero carbon by 2050, and I got all party agreement for that. That's what should be driving us. We should be driven by making a city that everybody wants to live in, that's a healthy city, that has clean air, and that is not expensive to move around. We have no public transport. We have private transport. It was deregulated in the 80s. I cannot control that. I can only negotiate, and I have done so in order to get lower bus fares than we did have. So I want a city that's a playable city, a city where the streets belong to the people as much as they do to the cars. I want a city there where you feel absolutely safe walking and cycling around. I'm never late because I cycle, and it keeps me fit up to a point until I lose my voice. So let's think about the big picture instead of bitching about parking and the little things that annoy people for a short while, because when you get over it, you'll have a much better life, and I would expect every young person to see that, because the kids do.
Thank you very much. Right. The last of the pre-selected questions is in relation to fees. As I'm sure many of you are aware, it's very concerning at the moment for a lot of students and a lot of prospective students about how they're going to fund their university education, if at all. Obviously, the government has removed all of the maintenance grants and has replaced them all with loans, which means people are in more debt for longer. And they are planning to remove the cap on how much universities can charge for tuition. And if any of their past attempts are to be believed, they will probably succeed. So naturally, students in universities are very worried about this. And my question to you is, as mayor, what would you do to try and help students to ensure that even those from poorer backgrounds can still access higher education? We'll start with you, George.
Well, first of all, I'd use my direct line to government and do everything I could to prevent the change in the fee system that would enable universities to charge whatever they like. I think that would be extremely divisive. It would be socially divisive. It's not going to help with social mobility, and I think that the universities are great drivers of social mobility. I'm talking to the universities, both our universities, to have a Bristol offer. We are a learning city this year. This is our year of learning, and we are the first UNESCO recognised learning city in the UK. It's something that, in England, sorry, because Swansea and Glasgow are as well. And that's something I negotiated with UNESCO, because I saw that it was really important that we have a city that everybody learns for life. This university is about learning for the real world, and you do it really well. And I want to make quite sure that everybody has access. I want to work with the universities to work directly with all the schools across our city so that they give more access to some of the people who wouldn't have access to university, and link that with scholarships too. So we must be driven in terms of the fees and the grants and the loans by what enables us to get greater level of social mobility, because it is a sticking point. It may just be loans that you pay back as a tax in later life, but nevertheless that is off-putting for many people who don't see that they will be able to afford that, even though it doesn't kick in until £21,000 income. So I'm deeply opposed to opening the level of grant to anything higher than currently exists. It's easy to say cut it. I would love to cut it back to 6,000 or so, but I would need to be able to tell you how I would pay for that.
Thank you. So yeah, like I said, I was I still do support the students. We occupied Core 24 for those 23 or 24 days over it. I don't think we should even pretend that we can do anything about tuition fees. Universities are businesses now. Students are cogs in a machine, pushed out to workplaces. We're basically pushed into. I mean, I'm quite lucky. I've managed to make myself self-employed, and I feel a lot more freedom from that. But essentially, what universities have become is a commodification. Turning students into just numbers and pushing them out. I remember Steve West. We had lots of discussions with him when the Vice Chancellor here, when we were here, and although he said he was on side, essentially it is a business, and they're not really that interested in what students think. Actually, they're more interested in making money off people, saddling people with a debt. So you come out at age 21 if you start 18, saddle with them debt. Now, what is it, £9,000, 80? So it's like 40 grand worth of debt even before you've even started getting a mortgage or getting married or anything else. And that's essentially what they want. They want to make more money off people while the rich get richer. And personally, I believe in free education. I still believe in that premise that actually it's not a means to, what is it, a means to an end? Is that right? Means to it. It's not a means to an end. It's a gift in itself. I studied sociology, and although that hasn't enabled me to get a career, if you like, actually it's given me the insight into how the world in some parts operates, and it's put me in good stead really to selling tea on the street corner, which is absolutely fantastic, and I love it very much. But yeah, I believe in free education, and that people should, whatever their background. I'm working class, and I'm lucky that I actually had a chance to go to university. Personally, if I was mayor, I'd be right on that picket line, right outside the university, fist in the air. Let's get to London. Let's go and challenge the Westminster elite and the elite in Bristol who don't want people to have freedom of education.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I mean, you know as well as we do that there isn't much that locally can be done in terms of student fees and student loans. But what can be done at a local level is holding both the universities to account through their programmes that have been around for many years, as we know, called widening participation. I'd be very interested to know what the university's doing about that and what results they have around that, and that ties in with those students on low incomes. The potential students, what we can do locally is reintroduce the education maintenance allowance for 16 to 19-year-olds. When I worked at the City of Bristol, we had that. It was a very short window, actually, education maintenance allowance, but what it did is it upped the attendance for those students, and it really gave them a reason to come into college. And actually, it's that age group that you need to prepare for university, because actually a lot of it is about fear. They don't understand it's the idea of getting into debt, as the fear of it, as much as the actual reality maybe when they get in there. You lot are all here, so clearly the fear that you may have experienced whilst you were doing your A-levels or whilst you were doing your BTECs didn't put you off coming. It's the ones that are being put off because they're coming from social or economically deprived backgrounds. There are other groups of young people that I am really disturbed about the idea that they're losing their maintenance, and those are care leavers, children that are looked after by the local authority. It used to be that they had their fees paid and they had maintenance grants. The idea that those young people are no longer in that position, and I do believe that that is something that the local council does have a responsibility for, and this local authority, the care leaving record is very poor. Ofsted are looking at this, and it's something that as a local mayor, it is something that you can focus on. So actually, what George Ferguson described as my direct line to government in order to lobby, any of the people sat up here is going to have what is described as my direct line. So actually, when the main parties come up, I think we want to hear what their policies are at a national level, because this is a national issue.
If you could wrap up. Oh, never mind.
Okay, well, one of the things is when I get on my direct line to the Prime Minister when I'm elected is hopefully they won't just accuse me of just bitching about the little things, because it is the little things that make the difference to a lot of lives.
Yeah.
Let's be actually clear about this. I mean, there isn't much we can do about the imposition of student fees. They got up to 9,000 after a blatant lie from at least one party saying they wouldn't allow them to go up further. England now has the most expensive student fees in Europe. If you go over to Germany, Germany doesn't charge tuition fees. And the reason why Germany doesn't charge tuition fees is because they recognise that investing in people like you is a common good for the entire country. That you, when you succeed, are going to bring much more to this country. You're an investment in the future. And the other problem with student fees is we're in a similar situation as we were before the financial crash, where we had a lot of debt being built up by financial companies, and then that got transferred over to the public sector when it all went AWOL. At the moment, there's £100 billion worth of student debt. Public exposure to that is going to increase over the next 15 years to £500 billion. That's the next big financial problem for this country. What can we do locally? There are some small things that we can do. EMA is already mentioned, but what we also need to do is make sure that students are given opportunities to make savings wherever possible, in the housing, in transport. For instance, we can make sure that more students get their deposit back. Over 30% of students fail to reclaim their deposit. There are little things that we can do, but we also, in the end, need to change this government to get the big thing changed.
Thank you.
This question comes up at just about every university hustings I go to, and I can understand why. Personally, I cannot understand why any government would want to burden students with an enormous amount of debt just as they're stepping out of university to go into the world of work and business. Absolutely ridiculous. But we need to make one thing very, very clear, is that also there is no such thing as free education. It costs. Every single bit of education you've had has cost somebody. Now, what I thought I'd do is a little bit different way of looking at this, is because I anticipated the question. Over the last couple of weeks, when I've been going around the city, I've actually spoken to a few people that are taxpayers, because at the end of the day, it's their taxes and our taxes that pay for education. And I was quite surprised to find that just under 5% of the people I spoke to would be happy for either a larger percentage of their taxes or to even pay a little bit more in tax in order to make sure that university education was either, the fees were either reduced or eradicated altogether. Everybody else, nearly 95%, which over 95%, did not want that to happen. And I think looking at the people and speaking with them, for them, they felt there was bigger priorities. Even when I explained to them that this is the country's future, you are going to be the scientists, the mathematicians, the engineers that are going to build this country ongoing. But still, people did not want to pay more to help you. There is a big problem there. And if we really want to get university education fees down to an absolute minimum or nothing, then we need to get the average everyday person in the street on your side and to understand that you don't just go out every night of the week drinking, that you don't just go out messing about, that you are this country's future and we need to invest in it.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just make an appeal as well, and to the audience? So there's a big backdrop to this whole election, okay? And it's beyond the specifics of the question you ask. It's what is real political change. There's a whole kind of narrative being created around what political parties are and are not, and what role they serve in politics. There's a whole narrative created around what the establishment is and who it is and how we get rid of it. And I think that the paper-thin version that's been peddled to Bristol needs to be tested, and maybe we can test it tonight and see if it has any credibility whatsoever. But let's get back to that, hopefully. It's about education. I think, along with transport, health, I think education is one of those things that just should not be left up to the free market. It's just too important, a public good. We need to be absolutely directive in terms of the way we want it to run. And I'm horrified that more and more education is being turned into a commodity. And that's not just a commodity in terms of you buy and sell it, as we do currently, but also in terms of your socioeconomic background. We know if you're poor, you're less likely to get access to good quality education. Poverty and deprivation is concentrated in some schools, affluence in others. We know that that sets up life chances and life trajectory. I'm also concerned about what happens in university. If you're having to work just to be able to eat, you're not spending time studying. The impact that has on the grades that come out the other end, the impact that has on career trajectory post-university. And I'm also concerned about the political implications of indebtedness of students. I got the last year of maintenance grant, but I had enough debt to make me scared. And the amount of debt I had meant that I didn't go off and join some of the political campaigns I wanted to go into. I went and started to work to try and pay off my debt. It robbed me of my political, my democratic voice and participation. What can we do in Bristol? We need a mayor that stands up for Bristol and is robust, maybe as robust as Boris Johnson, George, when they're standing up to central government. We haven't really had that. And I think that maybe what we can do is look at mobilising city resource, maybe a Bristol bursary. And I'm not advocating Boris Johnson here. I'm just saying I've heard more. I've heard more a stronger opposition to central government from Boris than I have in Bristol. But maybe we can talk about mobilising our business, those businesses that are interested in social impact, about developing a Bristol bursary for some of the most disadvantaged students in the city. We all benefit from that.
Well, that's it with the pre-selected questions. So we're now going to open it up to yourselves, the audience. Yeah, the real stuff. So, are there any questions on the floor? Pick one.
You're a student. Sam?
Cheers. I just want to come back to what you were saying about transport earlier. One of the sorry, I don't know your name. What you were saying about trains. I just wanted to make the point and sort of ask a kind of a question about there are lots of unused railways, and so why I don't know if you've already lobbied for this already, George, but are you lobbying for some kind of light rail system? And would to the other candidates, would you? I mean, Manchester has a fantastic tram system that they've implemented in the last 50 years. Really, I mean, my brother used to live in Manchester, and it was so easy to get around.
I totally agree with you. It's a lack of investment, but we are now investing about £400 million. Can I have the? Can I have that one? Yeah. We're investing about £400 million as a result of the partnership between the.
Did you turn that one off? Sorry. There we go.
Between the four authorities. You may have noticed there's a little bit of work going on at the moment in the city centre and just on the motorway near here. That will give you the Metrobus system, which is a £200 million project that will connect you to a hub at Temple Meads and the city centre, go right north, south, east, west. And also we're investing in the rail system, another £200 million, which will take people to Portishead. It's been delayed because of idiotic regulations that have delayed it. And we're investing in the north of Bristol suburban railway system. So there is a huge amount of investment going on. And I'm absolutely determined that we produce the means of most people being able to be able to travel without jumping into their car. We have an absolutely stupid situation where nearly 50,000 people drive into the city centre every day, and 85% of them are driver only. And it's because they don't have the choice. I know as an architect, it takes at least 3 years from concept to completion to build a house, let alone change a transport system. So we're on the way, and by the end of next year, 2017, we will have totally completed that Metrobus system.
By 2020, we will have started transforming the suburban railway system. There's huge benefits to come, and this university is going to benefit hugely from the Metrobus.
Would anyone else like to respond to that question or statement?
Yeah, hello.
So is it alright if I just say something else quickly just in response? It would take about 10 seconds.
Oh, very well. Because it's you.
Sorry, no, I just wanted to just check. Yeah, that's great. Investing in new rail systems and such like. Would it be a, and again to all the candidates as well, would you be considering investing in as well in a rail system that would allow people to come to park their cars on the outside of Bristol if they're coming from way out when, get on a tram, come into the centre, just to facilitate, I don't know, pedestrianising the centre, so it's just bicycles, maybe taxis, things like that.
Yeah.
Right. That was just that's all I was really wondering.
That's what we are going to do.
Okay.
Anyone
carry
else?
on.
If we start with Paul, and then we'll go to Paul. We'll start with Paul Turner. Just to notify you all, we're giving you a maximum of 2 minutes in each instance, so that's why the knocking is continuing. Just so you're aware.
I probably won't take anywhere near as long as that.
Very well. Very good.
Yeah, the network is great. The rail Metrobus, I'm still not convinced is actually going to be the great white hope that it's going to be intended to be, or brown hope, or any hope actually, to be perfectly honest. It is a real problem with getting people in and out of the city, and I don't think that we're looking at it in a particularly positive manner from looking at the future. This is a big city. It is a very, very prosperous and important city. Maybe we should be looking a little bit more ahead and looking at the possibility of underground, of elevated railways, and trying to get it so that people can easily move around the city in a vehicle of some sort, not necessarily a car or a bus, and just make it so much easier for people to get around, which is just impossible at the moment.
That is cloud cuckoo land, Paul. An underground for Bristol. You're talking billions. Tell me where you get the money from. It's really easy to speak from outside. You try and do that. It's nonsense.
In the same instance, George, where's the money coming for the buses and the new train lines there for us?
That's one. It's probably it's a
20th. It'd be 5% of the cost of doing an underground. An underground, you're talking about many billions. I'm talking about a total of 400 million.
Right. But we want to try and get through as many questions as we can.
Where's the money come from? The money comes from, 3/4 of it comes from government, and about 1/4 of it comes from the 4 authorities.
Just a very, very quick response to that.
Very quickly, because I'd like to hear from other candidates and also other questions.
It's an idea that we need to be looking at possibly for the future. It is, however, not a good idea to continuously be throwing what can well be hundreds of millions of pounds at projects that solve actually very little.
Right. Before we move on to another question, were there any other candidates wishing to respond to this question?
Well, as transport is still on the table, just a kind of just an appeal, just a bit of an appeal actually, and it comes to this question of listening to people and actually including them in the actions we take on the city. Now, I'm not like anyone, I ride a bike. I don't take it as my primary identity in calling myself some people do this now. I just ride a bike. I walk a lot around the city. I want to see people out of their cars. I love that. I love the eye contact. And I think it brings streets alive. But when we're taking these measures, we have to recognise that sometimes we do things that have a disproportionate impact on the lowest paid and the most vulnerable people. Some of the people that have been impacted as well by measures to hit on commuters have been low-paid school staff. I know this because I'm being told by some of the staff. It's cleaning staff, it's dinner staff. who are losing significant portions of their pay because of the way it's been done. The failure to introduce blue badge provision in RPZ as well. So we've got to be careful that we know when we go into the soaring rhetoric, wherever we learned it, and it all sounds very poetic, that we're not inadvertently disadvantaging some of the most vulnerable people and lowest paid people in the city who depend on their cars for both for the socialisation and being able to actually access their employment. And unfortunately, if we don't listen, those are the kind of mistakes we make.
Excellent. Were any of the other candidates wishing to respond?
I'm happy to move on if rather than talk about transport.
Did you
Let's
really?
move on. Well, just a very quick one, which is to point out that when we originally started off with Metro Bus, when it was still known as Bus Rapid Transit, one of the reasons why the Len administration, which was Labour, then well, it was Lib Dems and the Labour group, went forward with it, was because we were told that 95% of the funding was going to be provided by central government, and it's very concerning to see that now 75% of the funding seems to be coming from the local authorities, and I think that's 25%, so it's still 5 times as much as it was when we started. But I think well, you just said it was 25%. It was 5% when it started.
If you can...
It wasn't 5% when it started, so it's not 5 times the amount.
Any more?
Yeah, we'll
Pete?
I'm going to take the opportunity of all the candidates being here to ask whether they would care to make an apology to the 27,000 students of this university for 2 things. Firstly, for the white elephant, to give it its correct title, of the 220 million that is causing the motorway to be closed, which means students come from their city centre hall of residence to the campus to study, and are then left at a bus stop for a year because the southbound motorway has been closed to put through Metrobus every night for a year. So I'm going to ask whether any of the candidates would like to apologise for that in the first instance, and secondly, to pick up on the housing question, could the mayoral candidates comment upon the assumption in the West of England Housing Market Strategy document that 75% of the homes Professor Glenn Bramley of Heriot-Watt University estimates Bristol needs will not be built because the city has assumed that ones that have been in the planning system for up to 5 years and not been built will suddenly magic into appearance. The Mayor's affordable housing strategy, as Nick Hooper pointed out, allows all of those planning agreements to be negotiated back to zero, with no affordability contribution, with no Section 106, with no community infrastructure levy in order to move forward the supply. But 75% of the homes estimated as needed in the West of England Housing Market Strategy are assumed to be magicked out of nowhere. Would the candidates like to apologise and explain?
Because the Mayor was directly questioned, I'll let you respond first, but then I am going to go to some of the candidates we haven't heard from.
Well, of course I apologise for any inconvenience, but you cannot change a system without breaking eggs, and the Metrobus will be transformational. I changed it because I thought that it was badly planned, and it's planned for the better, and it will have the best quality vehicles operating on it, and and the city, I was, and
Wait, don't talk over each other, please.
Okay, but it will improve. It's not perfect. I prefer a tramway system that would cost about 10 times as much. I prefer an underground system that costs about 25 times as much. It is the best that we've got, and it will give a much surer and faster system, and it will be of huge benefit from next year for the students of this university. Of course, I apologise for the inconvenience. In terms of housing, in terms of housing, this is a totally separate answer. You heard me, what I think about affordable housing. I think every development should have its at least 30% affordable housing on it. As an architect, I know how easy that some of the developers get out of this commitment by giving a calculation that proves they can't afford it. It's a false calculation that is based on the value of the land, or the price of the land. The price of the land should be zero, so that you can, and stop putting me off, the price of land should be counted as zero, so that developers can't get out of that. I'm absolutely with you about that. And of course, affordable housing does matter for students, because it ricochets the whole way through the system. And we've got to find a way of producing more of it.
We would like to hear from some of the other candidates in response to your very, very valid questions, Pete. And there's a lot that want to talk, Pete, so we're going to hear from them. I'd like to start with Christine, because we haven't heard from you in a while, and you seem to have some things you want to say, yes?
Okay. I'm not responsible for the bus routes, but I suppose what I would say is what contingency plans have been made for the interim. And how was that, how were the people that are using those services, how were they consulted? Because they would need to be at the heart of whatever solution it was that enabled the people to move around and get from this campus to wherever they need to go. That's the only way I can respond to that, I think. The 75% of the housing, this is a national issue. And it's the direct line to government, isn't it? And somebody on my right's got one, and there's 3 people from political parties on my left. We need to hear what the political parties' policies are on this, I would suggest, because it has to be done at a national level, because the architect is telling us that there's things on a national level that need to change. I'm not a housing expert, but this is what we need to hear, I would suggest.
I was going to leave it to Paul, because I've seen you've been waiting to speak for quite a while, and then we will hand down to Tony.
So on the Metrobus thing, I was one of the protesters that was up at Stapleton allotments, up in the trees, which was an ongoing battle with Bristol City Council. What George won't be telling you is before the election he was against the Metrobus, absolutely. He said that he would be against it. When he got elected, he changed. This is what I'm actually really this is what I'm really sick of, is politicians that say one thing, they get elected. Yeah, of course you can have a right to reply. Of course. They say one thing, they get elected, and they do another. Now, the Metrobus... Hello? The Metrobus... the Stapleton allotment land up there is Bluefinger land, some of the most fertile land, not just in this country, but in the whole of Europe, and now it's been tarmacked over. As a keen and environmental activist, away from bus routes and things like that, actually that's some of the most fertile land. Once it's gone, and now it has gone, and now all we see is tarmac, beautiful land, really, and the wildlife up there, absolutely fantastic. If you do get a chance to go up there, go and have a look and see what monstrosity this council, all councils are creating. That's when George talks about the children's future, that's the future. Concrete, tarmac, and greyness and blandness.
Right. We're going to allow the Mayor a 1-minute reply, and we're also going to change our time, because we want to hear some other questions. We know there are other questions, and we're fast running out of time. So from now on, it's going to be a 1-minute speaker's time.
Okay, just quickly, on the blue finger, what I've done is really radical, and I've protected forever the 90% of the land that is the blue finger that has not been used for the Metrobus. I was legally unable to change the Metrobus, which I would have preferred to have altered its route. I was legally unable to do because of the previous agreements with the Department for Transport that I inherited. That is real life. I have to live with that. And so the combination of those 2 accusations is, one, I couldn't change it as much as I wanted to. I did change it. And the other, I've done something really radical, and I've changed, and I've put into covenant all the rest of the land so that it will be for growing and wildlife forever.
Now, there are 3 candidates at the end. Are you wishing to respond to this as well?
Oh, definitely. The question about the 85,000 homes, and you said about 59,000.
There seems to be a lot of smoke and mirrors about affordable housing. Affordable to who? If the house price is £200,000, an affordable house only has to be 80% of market value, so that's 160,000. We should stop talking about affordable homes. Right? There's a lot of council land in Bristol. Why don't the council start building homes? Let's go back to the council houses. People who are leaving university, not all of them are going to be in the jobs they want to be in. So they're going to be in a low-paid job. At least they're going to have a home to go to. We've saturated the market now. We've allowed private landlords to come in and name their price. It's time that the council and the mayor, who to be, decides that they're going to start building council houses. And which one of you are going to stand up to the plate and do that?
Thank you very much. I'm guessing everyone wants to speak on this, so if we go back to the system of just passing it down, we can then hear from all of you.
Okay, I have started building council houses. I totally agree with you. Affordable, in inverted commas, is not affordable in this city. Affordable is affordable in Liverpool because the average house price is half the price. It's simply not affordable in the south, and that is a problem with that government definition of affordable housing. Totally agree. But I build new council houses, and then they're taken off us through right to buy within 5 years, and that means that we're not building that social housing, the social housing forever, and that is sad to me.
Okay, so as mayor, if I was made mayor, I'd start working with the community groups, which are actually already out there, to get those buildings, which I mentioned earlier, open. For example, this is just an example to give. Behind the Holiday Inn, at the bottom of the Stokes Croft, where the bear pit is, there's a row of houses there. Now I think there's eight houses. They're all owned by the council, yet they've been empty for over 10 years. They're perfectly habitable. They could be moved into tomorrow. You could have community groups working with local people to live in those local homes. It's really, I don't want to simplify it, but it actually is as simple as that. But we need to have practical measures taken and have radical ideas breathed into our politics, and a mayor who's prepared to stand up for Bristolians and not just, spout out about affordable homes. Because again, affordable to who? If you're under 35 in this country right now, you're probably going to be a renter for the rest of your life. We need to look at alternatives now. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Associations, these people have a lot of experience. They have worked with vulnerable people that need housing and need support for many, many years. The idea of the current Tory government giving right to buy to those tenants that already live in council housing association property. Again, this is another piece of housing stock that will go into the private sector. This is a national issue, and I'm going to say it again. I want to hear what the national policies are from the political parties that are represented here, because if we are actually going to solve this issue and many other issues that we've been discussing tonight, we need action at a national level. So I'm asking the three next to me to tell us what their actual party policies are and how they're going to go and talk to the national government to try to lobby and to try to change it. Because at the moment, they're going to be selling off the council houses in 5 years, apparently. That's a problem.
Okay, the Green Party national policies on housing is, one, we would abolish the right to buy. It serves no further purpose. And we have a situation at the moment where 30% of homes that have been sold under right to buy are now in the hands of private landlords. Second thing we would do is abolish the cap on the housing revenue account, which stops the council from being able to borrow to invest in new council housing. Third policy is to oppose the housing bill that's being put through Parliament, which is making it even harder for councils to build social housing, to build council housing. I grew up in a council house. I'm proud of having grown up in a council house. Christine grew up in a council house. We know what it's like. Marvin did as well. We need to make sure that we have houses that people can not only afford to rent, but also to afford to keep warm as well. So we also need homes that are decent homes and energy efficient.
Wow. Housing. In Bristol, what we need to do with council land is stop selling it. We need to retain it, we need to put it in trust for the city and the people of this city and their future. We also need to be able to build low-cost, speedy houses that are council houses and stay council houses, so that people can actually afford to live as opposed to these so-called affordable houses. We can do that quite easily.
We're not going to be able to build the balanced communities we need. One of my big concerns in Bristol, which again when I first raised it, you're told not to talk about this stuff because it's putting the city down, but it's a challenge of gentrification. Areas becoming so unaffordable that people of ordinary financial means are being swept out, you may call it sterilised, from those communities. And we're only going to be able to counter that if we get back to where we were, with building social houses where we can anchor people into those communities and make sure they don't get swept away by market forces. But I just make the appeal again before we go. The big backdrop to this election is what is real political change. We live in a country where if you go, the research tells us we are one of the most socially immobile countries in the Western Hemisphere. Our country is dominated by the 7% of the population who go to fee-paying schools. There's a narrative around what is political change. I just ask us to consider political change is not simply about political parties. It's about the socio-economic background of people who come to take power in this country. And it has to be a question that's first and foremost. And I hope that at university, you would not be content with taking a superficial argument that says all the political parties are also all nonsense. Political parties make it possible for people of ordinary financial means to run for political office. Independence, running without a party, is a financial privilege. It means you can get your hands on the tens of thousands of pounds it costs to run a viable political campaign. You get rid of political parties, ask what politics looks like. It just looks like a plaything of the wealthiest people in this country.
Affordable housing isn't always affordable. A lot of affordable housing is at 80% of market rates. That's unaffordable for most people and usually 90% of students as well.
The two at the end, are you wishing to talk as well?
You're very right there, Tony. One of my biggest issues is the amount of social housing, which affordable housing, as Tony quite rightly said, for an awful lot of people is not actually affordable. We need to increase the number of social housing places that there are across the city. There's an awful lot of council-owned land that is not really doing a great deal. There's an awful lot of, as Paul mentioned earlier, an awful lot of empty buildings across the city not doing a great deal. We really need to get animated with this, and we really need to change that, and we really need to get on board with social housing.
Marvin, did you have anything to say?
Two quick observations. One is I met with some developers of a major site in Bristol just yesterday. They're proposing 0% affordable. My point to them was, why would we support a program that is actually going to cost us money? Delivering unaffordable housing for a new Bristol elite exiles from London is not a neutral act. It compounds inequality, and we end up spending money on public services that kick into play when we have a more unequal, more fractured society. Secondly, it's just an observation. When stuff doesn't happen in Bristol's past, it's down to party political wrangling. When it doesn't happen in the last few years, it's down to national government legislation. I think we need to get a little bit consistent here on fair on the landscape.
Thank you.